Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're exploring the profoundly emotional intersection of restorative justice and the cinematic techniques used to actually capture it on film. We're going to look at how you can create highly engaging documentaries that show how justice actively builds peaceful societies. As we go through this, we'll examine real-life situations, look at some incredibly emotional examples, and break down the dynamic camera movements that filmmakers use to translate these complex, raw human experiences right onto the screen.
You know, acclaimed documentarian Joshua Oppenheimer put it brilliantly with this quote. Documentary filmmaking isn't just about passively observing things. It's truly a calling to heal society by shining a bright light on difficult truths. It's the art of combining the best of cinema and journalism, right? We want to put vital information into context to actively improve the human condition, making us better people, and ultimately cultivating a more just world.
So, to understand how we document this kind of healing, we first need to define what restorative justice actually is. Simply put, it's a system that actively brings victims and offenders together to mend broken relationships. It's a much more holistic approach to addressing criminal behavior, and it shifts the focus away from just pure punishment and moves it toward accountability, true empathy, and real healing.
Section 1. The Social Justice Lens, Marrying Camera to Emotion.
Think of yourself as a visual psychologist for a minute. Your job as a cinematographer extends way beyond just capturing a well-exposed image. Look at the stark contrast here on the screen. The traditional punitive system relies heavily on warehousing, basically forcing physical withdrawal and intense isolation. But the restorative model? That's built on active accountability and community healing. To document this journey on film, absolutely every choice you make, from the lens you select to the way you move the camera, has to serve that emotional core.
Section 2. Framing Trauma and Conflict, the Visual Metaphors of Isolation.
The crucial takeaway here is that you're using specific camera placements and lenses to make the audience actually feel a subject's trauma and entrapment in their own bodies. Distant, locked-off shots literally make a character feel small and trapped by their environment. Pushing a character to the extreme edges of the frame instantly communicates this intense lack of control. And if you want to convey severe anxiety, tools like swing and tilt lenses, or using a macro lens with a super shallow depth of field, create a profound, rapid sense of imbalance and disorientation for the viewer.
Take a second and imagine a distant, completely locked-off shot framing Jack here in his 30-year cycle of isolation. It perfectly visualizes his intense feeling of powerlessness before restorative justice finally intervened. Jack's story shows us that just locking someone up only forces a physical withdrawal. It leaves all that underlying trauma completely unaddressed, trapping the person in a literal repetitive cycle of crisis.
And this brings us to a really interesting point from Aaron Edward Olson. He notes that the traditional system acts like a massive barrier, literally and figuratively keeping victims and offenders in completely separate frames without any real chance for resolution. By denying victims the choice to seek alternative measures and just sending offenders far away for decades, the system is honestly doing a massive disservice to absolutely everyone involved.
Section 3. Restoring Community in Rwanda, Panning Out to the People.
Let's look at a real-world example on a massive scale. We can track how Rwanda pivoted from the unimaginable tragedy of 1994, where an estimated 1 million people died in just 100 days, to an absolutely unprecedented community justice system. By reviving their traditional Gacaca model, they empowered 250,000 local judges to facilitate community-led healing, and this culminated in over 1 million trials by 2009.
1.1 million. That number is just staggering. It represents the estimated cases tried by the Gacaca courts right there on the grass of local communities. Imagine trying to capture this cinematically. The sheer scale of this open-air justice, where literally anyone from the community could stand up and raise their hand to speak, is exactly the kind of thing that sweeping crane shots would brilliantly capture to establish scale and a true feeling of communal triumph. So, to document such an epic, open-air pursuit of truth, you'd use dynamic, sweeping upward crane movements to show the vastness of the community gathering. You can imagine pairing those sweeping shots with epic background music and inspiring narration to really hammer home the emotional weight. Then, you'd contrast that with slow, dolly-in shots to draw the audience incredibly close into a survivor's testimony, focusing right in on those subtle emotional shifts. But using an unobtrusive direct cinema style, the camera becomes this quiet witness to authentic, transparent justice unfolding in real time.
Section 4. Intimate Shots of Accountability, Zooming in on Transformation. Okay, let's zoom back in on the individual level for a minute.
Programs like Bridges to Life, which was founded by John Sage back in 1998 after the tragic murder of his sister, use the restorative justice theory of change to help prisoners shed negative self-identities. By sitting in a moderated space and genuinely listening to crime survivors, offenders develop true, deep empathy. This is where the real psychological shift happens, replacing those old, negative self-identities with a raw recognition of the harm caused to real people.
Look at these numbers because they brilliantly illustrate the data-driven hope behind these programs. An independent study showed that humanizing the justice process drastically reduces the cycle of violence. We're looking at a 30% decrease in overall recidivism and a massive 62% reduction in people returning to prison for a violent crime. The model actually works. To back that up even further, a Ministry of Justice evaluation found that restorative justice reduces the risk of reoffending by 14 points. And crucially, it also brings overwhelmingly high satisfaction rates. The vast majority of victims report that going through the process actually made them feel better and safer after an incident of crime. If we were filming this exact emotional journey, from isolation to empathy, within a program like Bridges to Life, the camera movement has to be highly intentional. We'd start with clean, separate single shots to visually isolate the offender and victim. Then, as the connection slowly grows, we'd introduce dirty, over-the-shoulder shots to show that growing awareness. Finally, we'd use tracking shots to slowly tighten the frame, ultimately linking the subjects in an overlapping, deeply intimate composition exactly when true understanding is reached.
Listen to this quote from Todd Rogers, an offender who experienced the genuine power of forgiveness. It perfectly captures the emotional breakthrough that a tight, intimate camera angle is designed to emphasize. A slow push-in right here would heighten the intimacy, perfectly matching the exact moment an individual realizes they are destined to be a difference-maker in this world.
Section 5. Visualizing peace and action. Trusting your cinematic instincts.
Creating a social justice documentary isn't easy. It's a calling that requires immense bravery. Independent filmmakers, like Jenny Livingston, for example, took enormous risks and faced uphill battles to bring transformative, marginalized stories into the mainstream. Documenting restorative justice requires that exact same commitment to getting to the very heart of a story, no matter how difficult the historical or institutional barriers might be.
So, how do you begin this journey? Well, deep immersion on the ground is vital. You really cannot effectively document these stories from afar. By examining your own biases, honing your skills through programs like the San Francisco Film School, and mastering the visual psychology of the camera, you can build a compelling narrative that sparks real, tangible societal action. I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Now that you know how deeply camera movement and restorative justice align to heal the human condition, what story will you tell next? How will you use dynamic dolly shots, wide sweeps, and extreme close-ups to force us to confront what it truly means to be human? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it inspires you to stand up, grab a camera, and actively advocate for true justice in our world.